Alright, folks. Welcome back. It is day 13. 皆さん、お帰りなさい。今日は13日目です。Let's see. Looks like we have gotten to the point where we're reviewing for at least today and tomorrow. Actually, today and then tomorrow we do have 5 radicals that are turning over. So that'll be interesting. Not too bad. Today seems like a short day. Yeah, relatively short day. So let's get into our review. This is the every other day, so it will be a short overall session as well, as I am preparing in the background for reviewing a lot of the last 100 days of Duolingo in order to cover that in some way, shape, or form soon. I think we're in T minus within like a week's time. Tomorrow we'll also have our Monday stream, right? It's Neverwinter Monday. However, we're gonna keep the WaniKani and the Hanzo Hero section going before it. So I'll probably start early as well, or a little bit earlier tomorrow. All right, let's see. So we done goofs yesterday a little bit. Private enclosure. Again, I tend to type cage instead of prison. That's a recurring one. Exit, right? Exit out of the mountain range. And unlocking new opportunities. Add an input. Or add an input job, right? Unlocking new rocks. Roku. Okay. Let's make sure the case. Okay. All right. So let's hop right in. Kanji meeting. So we're going with talent. Slides with barbs. Right. Slide with barbs. Pass. Lily pad. Thanks, Patty. Child. Cyborg. Oops. Doggo on big guy. Looks like a flag. Smells like a flag. Fuji-san. Pass. Do I have to put in the period? No, I don't. I don't know if there was a period or not in that abbreviation. Stuck. Maru. Keep them fire. Exit. Sword. Hilt. Pommel. Got the book. Cutting down trees. Oh, there, Keko. Konbawa. Pass. SpongeBob. Pass. Shoots. Right, shoot you. Wait. Eyeball. Pass. Oh. Locks of hair. This one I got. I'm gonna write a note on this one. Can come right to me. Let's write a note on this. So, Oh boy. I want to add an image of Kratos. I want to do an imagery of Kratos for this one. Right, Kratos. Okay. Use a proper noun to reinforce the mnemonic. So, no boy. No boy. And Kratos climbs mountains a lot of times. Okay. Use Nana. Nana. 2 levels of people. Thanks, No Show. Pass. This is where we had one yesterday. So, this is unlock new potentials in computer science. Is what we're gonna use. So unlock new locks on opportunity. For the shta, I'm not sure you got the mnemonic as co-intended, which is fine, of course, but I'm pretty sure he's not talking about being stuck, but really about stuck on crap under your... No, I know. I don't like using that word, so I already got it. Yes. What's below you? What's below your foot? Yeah, no. But instead, I made it about gum being not your foot being stuck, but something stuck to your foot. And I'm thinking about gum, not that word. So, no, I'm fully aware of all the permutations of it. I actually had a discussion with myself, if you didn't catch it, about the different ways you could interpret shita. But again, just like the last time when you said something isn't a pass, it depends. Either you understand the mnemonic alone or my mnemonic on top. So most of the time, the mnemonic is not only based on Ko's interpretation, but also mine. Mine is far more memorable to me. If you look down and something is stuck to your shoe, it's good enough. It's shta, right? To be stuck. Actually, if you pronounce stuck, it sounds like shta more than the other word. The other word doesn't actually sound like it more, so that's just my personal preference. Something is stuck on your shoe. And also the no boy thing doesn't really work too well, so I'm adding Kratos as I mentioned earlier, and then this one doesn't work really well, so I'm thinking of what I'm thinking of inputting at a CS, at a CS job, which is his Ko's mnemonic. I'm thinking of unlocking new locks of opportunity as opposed to thinking about it negatively by using getting new locks on your career, so you may consider changing your career. Yeah. Oops. Okay. Oops. Oh, that's not even the read. It's the Taishita. What were the different versions? And then the other one was Big Deal. Oh, great. Okay, let's write a note about that. I think I haven't hit great at all once. So we'll write a great on Taishita. Okay. Okay. 7 things. Let's pass. You have tres leches cake. Nice. Wow. Very nice. That sounds delightful. Do I want to change this too? It's okay. Oops. Was a hard one for you too in the end. The reading made you think of New York. Don't know why really, so it's not really related to input, but that's how I finally managed to retain it anyways. New York. Interesting. New York. Now that is a challenge. How do you get it to what's a clever way of getting it related to New York? Did you have a job in New York that dealt with like CS? Or maybe it was the mnemonic reminds me of a tech job in New York though, like a business job in New York. So Ko's mnemonic was that oh, I guess New York. Oh, maybe New Roku. Yeah, that means New York. Yeah, that's actually pretty good. If you think of New York when you say New Roku. Like it actually sounds like New York to me. New York. Because your doesn't yoku roku is close enough. Yeah. So actually that's really fast. I don't know how the character reminds me of New York though. Let me see. What could you say? Does New York have structures? It's great going the other way around, like going the reverse direction. So when you think of New Roku, you can then you picture the character right away. And then I don't know how you would go the other way around, where when you look at the character and then immediately think New Roku. Yoku. New Roku. That's a good one though, phonetic wise. That's a really good one. I was trying I had a very difficult time remembering I have a bias towards negative sentiments, and I'm partial to positive sentiments. So his mnemonic was you input with all your might at a job, right? And that job comes with new locks as you go. So you might consider a different job. So it was a negative spin. So instead, in order to lock it in, lack of a better word, in order to lock it in, I switched it and think of as you do a CS job, right? You input a lot of things. However, there are many locks before you, and you do your job to unlock new locks of opportunity as you're doing the job. So new roku, right? New roku. So I still attempted to use Ko's mnemonic, but I spun it in a way that it's more proactive. And proactive things sit with me far more, largely because when I'm on the internet, you still get swarmed with negativity more than positivity. So positive things, ironically, I know how this sounds from a generational standpoint, positive things are lackluster these days. They're underrepresented. So oftentimes when I use a positive mnemonic, it sticks out more than a negative mnemonic because there's a swimming pool of negative mnemonics all the time. And that's kind of a general consensus too. Like Hansa Hero, the developer of Hansa Hero, typically sways a little bit towards the negative mnemonic. I like mnemonics that are eccentric, but also very peculiarly potentially cringy and like wholesome. Largely due to the nature that when you're consuming products, you're more bombarded by the opposite. So you kind of don't want to cross those wires here and there, or I choose not to cross those wires here and there. Like no boy, I would probably, yeah, no boy is kind of hard actually. I don't know where I would go with no boy. I wrote Kratos because Kratos, I forgot his adopted son, but he would say boy a lot, and he would say all various confirmation of boy. So, and Kratos climbs many mountains, both figurative and mythological and literal, with his son as well. So whenever I think of Kratos, I imagine him and his son climbing like Mount Olympus kind of thing. So that's why I've gravitated towards Noboru with Kratos as my mnemonic. Yeah, New Roku. That's pretty good. I'm gonna have to remember that because that would be great to retroactively put it in place. Actually, most of the things I remember the best happens to be when someone chimes in. I like it for Kratos. Don't forget the no part though. No. Kratos says no boy a lot. Like, no boy. Like, get back here, boy. Like, he says a lot. So, like just 2-word combinations. He refers to his son or his adopted son as boy. So he says no or yes to boy all the time as a response. So that's kind of, it's very difficult to forget that. And usually Kratos is saying no, not yes, because he's a stern and stringent father figure. So more no's than yes, of course. Again, the way you phrased it is on the negative side of things. So lots of times that's kind of how we are normalized to say. You said, don't forget the no part though, instead of, I hope you remember the no part though. So you used a negative statement in order to throw caution to a reminder, right? That's basically what I was referring to when it comes to like the internet English language. It's so normalized to use the fear of something you desire not to happen versus being wishful or proactive in the comments, you know. Yep. Illustrates. It's very normal. Not that I don't do it, right? For example, not that I don't do it, double negative. Okay. Yes, ushi. Or that's a radical. No reads on that. Let's see. Writing. This one we missed yesterday, private. Kudasai. Well, could you? Or could I? Could I? Exclamatory. 1,000 crosses. It's a good point. I'll try to be more mindful at least. Old habits die hard, really. Is that a negative? No, that's a confirmation. Oh, that's interesting. I didn't think about that idiom being a affirmative. Old habits die hard. As opposed to, well, you can't change old habits. That would be like like it's the same sentiment, only in the negative voice. It's interesting though. I'm not sure if this will change in the future, right? Like I just did that. I'm not sure this will change in the future, as opposed to saying maybe this will change in the future. I found myself, my diction, like my frequency of using negative statements and negating negative statements far more frequent in the last 10 years. Yeah. And like saying it's a good point versus, oh, that's not a bad idea. Right? Someone would say, oh, that's not a bad idea. So that's not a bad idea. A double negative again. It's so weird. And I don't want you to like end up, see, I'm doing it constantly. Once you hear it, it's hard to go back. Right? It's hard to go back. That's fine. It's not so bad is double negative. So it's not so bad once you hear it, as opposed to it's hard to go back. And hard is technically a negative word. So, you know, like you got this, as opposed to that. I think I might be a little hyper focused on it quite a bit. I don't know if people actually, yeah, see, I don't know. I am unsure, right? There is a distinct possibility that it may be relevant to making someone more positive if they are in a negative headspace. However, I haven't really done it consistently in general, where what would be the effects, if not at all, if someone isn't being like if you did not focus on maintaining a positive spin on things, does that affect someone who's around you merely by exposure? Right, merely by exposure. I haven't really thought of it that way. I know that there are specific people that I watch, and when I really scrutinize their form of communication, a large majority of the people that I listen to tend to have a very affirmative sounding diction. And to this day, I am unsure if that have made some behavioral differences in my outlook. But it is a very interesting observation, and I tend to talk about it a lot. So hopefully we'll collect together, right? Hopefully we'll pull together more and more awareness of funny occurrences and frequency in people's speech. I think I am far more focused on speech patterns now than ever before, because due to the nature of having to understand Japanese or trying to understand Japanese and Chinese, you kind of get into this flow of, oh, so this person would rather say that's not good versus that is good, or that is bad, versus oh, this one says, oh, that's not okay, versus I don't like it, or like I don't think it's good, or like there are many ways to like offset and negate stuff. There was one time I remember reading a sentence. It was a response. Someone was saying something exciting, and they said something along the lines of, I don't think that is not true. And my thought was, I still have to think about it. I don't think that is not true. So you can change not true to false, and then they don't think it's false. So that means there's a chance it's true, but they're not saying it is true. That's what that statement says, right? And my thought was, boy, if you normalize that, it would take a couple seconds. And my thought is, it took me a whole like 5 minutes, like it took me like 2 to 3 minutes to figure out what that person meant in a Reddit post, and I could see people who are used to it, they just know, oh yeah, that's it. It basically just means they kind of think it's true. Like there's a chance it's just true, but their focus is that it's they think it's false. And I'm like, is that what they really mean? And then I read the rest of the post and I'm like, I'm not sure if everyone is on the same page about that. Oh, Blair says, oh, I hate when people do that. I don't think it's not true. It could be true, but I'm not giving you the impression that I believe so. Yeah, that's exactly the impression that I got at first. And when people, when the following responses is like, okay, I kind of see it. Right. I'm not gonna not be looking forward to paying more attention to this. Yeah. Wait. I'm not gonna be okay. I'm not gonna be not looking. Okay. So you're looking for it. I see what you did there. Yeah. Right now the most common response in order to do the same type of I guess the most frequently the most condensed version, or the most frequent condensed version that I have encountered, is I don't disagree. This is the classic way. So I don't necessarily agree with you, however I don't necessarily disagree with you. I don't disagree. This is the I have often wondered, when people learn English, how do they address what this means whenever someone replies on the internet? Because I don't disagree is incredibly common now. And I think to this day, when someone says I don't disagree, the other person, even if they're a native English speaker, like if they speak English really well, they might still misconstrue what this means. Like, because you have to like clarify, because what do you mean by you don't disagree? Do you think, like, do you agree with some part of it, or do you disagree with some part of it, or are you just simply acknowledging that you don't disagree but you haven't considered that there's anything you agree with? I don't disagree. Negations. Lots and lots of negations. Oh wait, I was gonna try. I was gonna give you I was thinking of a pair of examples. Something like, I hope this works, versus I don't think this is going to I don't think this is going to work, right? So the difference between I think, well, usually I say I think this may work, versus I don't think this will work. Now you might be thinking, I like this example. Now you might be thinking, how these statements are not the same, right? They're not the same. From my experience, when someone says I don't think this will work, they often suggest they're not saying it will not work. They are suggesting that they think this will not work, as in there's still an open possibility that it may work. However, they're not confident in it. Right? Now, hear me out. That's how it's linked to, I think this may work. So the sentiments, oftentimes when I encounter someone saying this, I, for a while, defaulted to, oh, they have doubts that this will not work. And then ultimately came to the conclusion that they're expressing the possibility that it may or may not work, right? Using the word think. So things like this, I don't know how Japanese, I don't know if I'll ever reach a level of Japanese or Chinese that allows me to kind of, or figure out things, negotiate things like this, where when someone says, I don't think this will work, they're not saying it will not work, but they're saying it may work as well, but they're not confident in this, meaning I think this may work. This would be the affirmative. So if you ask someone, right, and then if someone asks you, hey, what do you think about this? What do you think about this idea? And the difference between saying I think this may work versus I don't think this will work, right? One sounds positive, or they both kind of sound positive, right? Only since you added don't, you add ambiguity, and the ambiguity suggests you're not confident. So then, whether you know this statement or not, that it may work, you give the person doubt. And oftentimes, I think people feel this. They intuit this when they're a native speaker. They don't necessarily process that why they feel like they don't believe you, right? When you say, I don't think this will work, they are less likely to believe you than saying, I think this may work. These are the things I think about, so welcome to language learning. And Japanese is making me realize that even more because of like how they say things like 大丈夫です, right? 大丈夫です. Or いえ, right? いえ, 大丈夫です, right? When do you use いえ, いえ, 大丈夫です versus 大丈夫です for specific meanings and whatnot? This is why Japanese has like 16 verb forms. Perhaps has it. If someone tells you something you don't understand and you don't want them to know you didn't understand, simply answer, it's not false. Made pretty popular in French by a comedic TV show. Yeah, it's not false. So, here's my take on it's not false and all the other ones. I would love to see in the future that this type of mentality is not a double standard. So this, or like become less of a double standard. So what I mean by that is it is currently a double standard. So oftentimes people are able, in my opinion, people are able to cast null hypotheses, doubt when protecting themselves in English. However, they strictly use hypotheses. I'm using these very specific words because I have a slight segue on hypotheses and null hypotheses. It's very forced, but hear me out here for a moment. So hypotheses driven statements, when they're confirming their suspicions. So when and it's a great, this is very consistent. I would say 7 out of 10 times you can use this to deduce their level of competence, or like their level of confidence in their competence or their perceived competence. When someone says, I don't disagree, versus I agree. So when someone goes about and they say I agree, it means they're using confirmation only in order to agree. So for example, I would say WaniKani is fantastic, and someone says I agree, and then I think, oh, okay. Now I'm kind of curious if they ever considered does that mean that WaniKani is only good, right? It's only good to them. So then I would ask them questions like, oh, so what kind of things do you think WaniKani lacks? Right? And does that impact your perception on it? You and I, Gecko, we already have an understanding that we see pros and cons and whatnot, right? Due to our extended discussion. However, oftentimes I'm kind of curious when someone says, I agree, are they talking about, oh, that's what I think? Or they're saying, huh, yeah, I overall agree. I overall agree with you. I have some stipulations, but I don't feel like sharing, right? Because I'm confirming your suspicions. When you say I don't disagree, it often means the opposite. They are null hypothesis testing now, where they would take into account all the things that it depends and realize, oh man, I don't know a lot of things. So let's just say, let's deny in action, basically the null hypothesis test. And how does this relate? So in science, I have come to realize that early on in my career, I had a terrible habit of doing what I stated here, which is hypothesis-driven thinking. Is the idea that you create a hypothesis, and then you read as much literature as possible in order to strengthen your argument by confirming all your suspicions. So in a sense, you're finding as much agreement as you can to your hypotheses. In this case, in conversation, it would be presumptions, things that you know, expect, social norms, cultural behavior, decorums that you're very familiar with. And then that's where it ends. It stops there. However, my life and my time in science have come to do the opposite, or have been balanced by the opposite. Now, oftentimes, when I say I agree, it means I agree with your sentiment. I don't necessarily, I have more to add because there are stipulations in which I disagree. So oftentimes when I say I agree, I mean I overall agree with the sentiments, and I can understand the conditions in which I can agree with you, and not necessarily confirming my suspicions. So there's more to talk about. So when I say I agree, I would add more to it. I'm more likely to add different things. So whenever someone tells me, oh, this is great, I'm like, oh yeah, I think this is great too. You know, here's an interesting thing that I noticed that could be a little bit dicey, right? As opposed to I agree because that's all that matters, right? Like that's all there is. You don't have to consider anything that you disagree. And then the opposite is true. However, when someone says they don't disagree, then they typically have something to add, because it depends. But in both cases, it depends. It is rarely, and this is where the unfair happens, to confirm something has far less possibilities, right? Far less possibilities than testing everything that goes against it. So that's kind of where the science lesson has taught me over time. When someone says a statement like, fictitious, I don't not sometimes disagree. When someone tells me like, for example, WaniKani is too slow, right? I would ask them, before I say I agree, I would say something like, okay, I can imagine a situation in my head that it is too slow. Now, I can ask the person a question to confirm whether WaniKani is too slow. However, immediately I also think about what are all the situations in which it is not too slow. So it is not too slow, as opposed to as opposed to saying WaniKani is fast, right? This would be another hypotheses-driven thinking, where, okay, so if this person thinks WaniKani is too slow, you write it on a subreddit, right? Sorry, Redditors. But you write it on a subreddit, WaniKani is too slow. Then immediately, what are the responses you'll get? Someone who disagree with this and state that WaniKani is fast. And here are my cases. Here are my examples. So they can confirm that it is too fast, and this person can confirm that that WaniKani is too slow. And that's kind of the type of discussion that most people have, as opposed to saying, is WaniKani not too slow, and WaniKani is not too fast, not fast. Whenever you do like null testing or null challenges, oftentimes it's self-defense. It's self-defense. I don't know where my point is. I think one of my points or perceptional points in this case is oftentimes you can confirm things. People confirm things without considering nulls. However, when they are not confident, they would focus on nulls and not confirm. So I'll give you an example. To confirm without nulls is the average statement. Like yesterday, someone corrected me on me saying, for example, skudu. I was using the example skudu. This lingered on my mind for a while, so I had to work out the logic behind why I said something, because largely I like understanding what is it that what made it really confusing. So I was looking at a screen with yong. Yong is to utilize, or it's actually utilize, to utilize. It's all of the above. Utilizing, right? And I made a comment about Chinese, because Mandarin does not have conjugation. So it is, when you try to define a character, not formally, not conjugation formally, in the same nature, right? So Mandarin, when you look at a character, it's all of these. And Jiao, someone that I've met recently, who is a Chinese person who have moved to the United States to study in a university, and they talked about things like come. I know, lack of a better word. I know, come and comes, right? And then they talk about how, like, so when do you know this? And they were asking another person who's in Malaysia, who also speaks Chinese and have English as a second language, right? Or simultaneous language, more or less. And their comment was very humorous. This is a little bit of a tangent, but I wanted to highlight the humor here in case. Their humor is, well, you use common sense. Sorry, this is what happens when you talk about English. well, you just fill it out and use common sense when to put the S or not the S, right? And then I realized that I don't even know when I've ever used the S, like this form. Anyways, so the reason why is there's an attachment to Chinese speakers, and I've had this growing up when I was talking to my parents and listening to my parents, where this character has utilizing, and immediately you think of Japanese. Contrast with Japanese, and you're like, wait a minute, you wouldn't know. So I used an example. I was like, yeah, so when I'm on WaniKani, I literally said that yesterday. On WaniKani, if I was thinking like, let's say a do verb, right? Because they differentiate, right? You can do, it's part of okurigana, right? When you have an okurigana added to a kanji, and I decide to use skuru, right? I decide to use skuru. So this is where I made a leap of logic that caused someone to make a statement of confirmation. And now I'm going to consider the null hypotheses. So when I said a statement like, oh, so when I look at something like a do verb, like skuru, I would think of it like use, but it's really to use, right? Actually, is this even visible? Did I block my face off? Yes. So I said something along the lines like, when I think of a do, I don't think of use, I have to think of to use. Now, this is where it happened, right? The person, obviously, when I went back, I'm like, so what error did I make? What mistake of speech did I make? I'm like, oh, I see where it is. So what did this person say after, who's during a Hanza hero stream? This person out of the blue made a statement like, skuru, right? Skuru is to make, and skau, right? Skau right? Skau is to use. And I lingered on this quite some time because my response immediately when I read, out of my pure confirmation bias, like, because I was thinking a certain way, I was like, yeah, well, that's what they mean. Yeah. Skuru is to make, and skau is to use, and they use the hirakana in that way. That is the statement. And my thought was, yeah, I don't see what I said as confusing skuru and skaru. And I was thinking, no, this can't be right? I must have said something that was confusing. Null hypothesis testing, right? Immediately at first, I was saying, you're being pedantic. I know what this means. And I start thinking back the whole time, how could I have mixed them up? So when I went back to the video footage, I said, when I think of a do verb, and like, for example, skuru, I think of use because of Chinese. However, I need to remember that the important thing is it's to use for the dictionary form because it's viewed as a verb. Now here's the part where I skipped and made the leap of logic. I was talking about yon, as in yon is use. And when I look at this, it doesn't have a way to distinguish between to use or not to use. When I was using skuru, I was talking about the do part, not the sku part. So this person obviously immediately thought that I thought skuru is to use, but I was thinking of yon. So because the point I was making is that there's no do, right? And my comment was like immediately something like, yeah, well, that's what they mean. Yeah, skuru means to make and skau is to use. Like, I know that. Like, you're being pedantic. And then I start thinking back, and that's kind of how that works, right? So, confirm, but then no consideration to explaining or thinking about, wait, how did that person confuse those two? Like, did they confuse those two? Is it basically human error? Well, most people, when they use confirmation, when they're talking about something and making a statement, they don't ever try to explain why is it that the person made the mistake or something, or how did it lead, because confirmation requires no alternative. Meanwhile, when I said that statement, I immediately thought, wait a minute. If I think I didn't make a mistake, then how was it misconstrued as a mistake? And I can explain it. And that's the short story I brought today, or that relates both WaniKani and Hanza's story. Hanza hero, right? And it also involves being not confident, right? When you ultimately become focused on null hypothesis testing, right? When you think of the null, it inherently introduces non-confidence. So at first I was like, I use confirm. I'm like, of course, that's what they mean. But how did I say it in a way that it made it sound like I didn't understand? And immediately I became less confident. And when I become less confident, I focus on all the possible situations or attempt to explain what is it that I misconstrued. Meanwhile, this person's statement was skuru is to make, skau is to use, and they put a thumbs up at the end, a thumbs up emote. And I don't know if I'm overanalyzing this type of thing, but thumbs up emote is a very presumptuous emote. So things like, hey, I'm being, this is the right answer, you're welcome. Or, hey, just to let you know, this is it. And I'm like, yeah, well, yeah, that is what it is. And it's gotten me into trouble a couple times already, but those people are not around because they basically predicated that they understand everything, and that's the statement that they made. And no additional statement. Like, there's nothing beyond that. So it was what I was thinking about yesterday. So I got to make sure I don't do that. I should try to do that less, where I'm thinking about something in Chinese but also thinking about something in Japanese. This is the first time, or this is one of the few times so far that I've encountered this little confusion. Right? I'm like, oh yeah, that's true. I think I said something else. I added something like, oh, I wasn't looking for a synonym for yong, right? I wasn't looking for a synonym for yong. So that didn't make sense if I didn't explain what I was thinking. So, right. If I didn't explain this connection, then that statement would be very confusing. As in, I didn't say, I wasn't trying to suggest that skuru and yong mean the same thing, because I was more focused on the definition and the use of this. However, this person, when they were making that statement, they only spoke in Japanese. So clearly in Japanese, that's probably what caused the confusion. It's cool that you actually spent the time to reassess that. I hope you know sometimes people will just put stupid stuff in the chat though, myself included, even if you didn't say anything confusing. It was very obvious that I was being confusing this time, of course. However, I know this might not be beneficial to other people. I like to show this type of thinking because I think from a selfish perspective, there are quite a lot of people in this functional world, like this internet world, that would feel similar, as in they might encounter these issues, as in, I think I'm right, but then I'm not confident. What do I do about it? How do I assess it? So I've done some of these a couple times already, where someone like they put their foot down and I'm like, okay, and then the next day I had time to think about it, reassess it, look at it from a different angle, and I talk about it. And I think it's a very helpful process in order to either come to terms, right? Understand what is it that you potentially could do better, or how you feel about it, and then whether the other person is concerned or not. That might leave an opportunity for that other person to share with a mutual thing. I think the people that I've been around my life, and maybe as we move into the future of language learning, we'll have that similar relationship, even from a perspective of, the viewer and the streamer kind of thing. These things are very important to me because I think lots of people linger on these disagreements a lot, and it can destroy and fester into incredible cynicism over time without understanding. I like emotes to a degree, but I do find them pretty subjective especially when you start accounting for humor, sarcasm, unless you know the other person very well. Yeah. And truly investigating that type of thing with the person is fantastic. I'm gonna call Sub-Zero out, but Sub-Zero is doing his thing. I think today is Monday, so he has classes. But sometimes when kappas are being used very frequently, you'll probably catch me asking them like, wait a minute. So are you capping me now, or is that like a not cap but cap situation, right? And that kind of thing does quite happen. Or here's a behaviorism that lots of people use, and this is a way to also say I don't disagree, is to make a statement. You make a statement that disagrees with the person. So you make a contradictory statement, right, that disagrees with someone, but usually the person you're talking to, and then you put a smiley face at the end. So this is a way to more aggressively say, I don't disagree, but I also think you're wrong. Or any form of tone change. So you use a positive tone change in the emote with a negative statement. I hope I'm not ruining anyone's online experience, but this is, I would say, if the other type of this version is like 7 out of 10, I think this is increasing in popularity. It might actually supplant this. So while this goes down, this form of response is going to go up at some point. So at this moment, you take a coin flip. So first select for emote. So look at a statement that ends with an emote, and then look at the tone change. If it's a tone shift, right? If it's a tone shift. And what I mean by tone, I mean like if it's overall a negative statement, suddenly the emote is positive, right? And that is a way to say, I disagree and I think you're wrong, but it's okay. However, how do you use this information, right? How do you use this information? It's more like, what are the odds, right? Let's talk about odds of the type of person. This is the deduction, so you have to confirm all these things, right? Deduction of behavior. It's a person that is very strong in opinion, right? So you have to take that into consideration. They might have a very strong feeling in this, and it is reinforced by, but it's okay, because it's only okay if this person's opinion is very strong. If this person's opinion is very weak, then they would proceed to use a negative tone. What's a negative tone emote? Question mark? An emote that elicits question mark, or unsure, like a thinking face, or so that would be someone who it can be less strong here and also less strong on the confidence. And most of these things, in my opinion, is very practical in the day of texting, right? Someone recently, maybe like 2 weeks ago, said like, human touch is not possible, or they suggest that it is rarely possible given the text limitation, and maybe like the limitation of text. It's like, I would agree if you're comparing it to like IRL, because there's nonverbal communication. There are a lot of other stimuli and cues when not IRL, but within the text world, it is still very nuanced in how you deduce someone's perceptions. And that is an understanding of written language, right? Written language changes very exclusively. So one of the biggest patterns when someone goes, I think a commentary, quite a lot of commentary, I would say greater than 50% statements. I don't know if this is true or not. I often, this is anecdotal. It would be cool to data mine all of this though. You take commentary, I think greater than 50% commentary. So the majority of comments is where you take a negative statement and you shift it to a positive statement using an emote. It's a very highly trending thing. It's to show that you're wrong. However, I'll let you be. This has originally, the person would be a little ticked off, right? This would be a trigger warning a lot of times. However, in the current state of things, I think it's less of a trigger now. It's less of a trigger because that's how people express disagreement and say, well, I don't agree with you, smile. That's kind of how they go about it nowadays. It's really interesting how the years have changed that. What you mentioned with thumb is pretty interesting too. I myself would almost never interpret it in a negative or arrogant way. For example, it would be partly cultural too. Yeah, exactly. And I'm talking more about the internet now, as opposed to like the internet as in like Reddit and stuff. As opposed to like old school. Thumbs up. So the context is that this person doesn't know me, right? And this person didn't add anything else to it. So to thumbs up, the thumbs up would be a response to the person. So like, for example, someone to make a statement, it's like, oh yeah, you're right. I might have said something confusing, right? I'm sorry if I was a little bit confusing. And then the person with thumbs up, right? After that. However, this is one message. So the one message was the correction, and then thumbs up immediately. So that's very different from a response answer, like a comment response. However, I could make an argument that maybe that's the social norm, right? That's the social norm of people. They assume that they're helping. That's it, right? Like, there are definitely other ways to interpret this, but one of them is you send a correction, you make a statement, and then you inherently assume that you are being helpful. That also illustrates a little bit of what the internet is like these days, right? And not for bad or good thing. I think whatever the person said was correct, and I agree with them, so not much to say there, right? However, it made me think about the error that I made, or the potential like confusion that I made, right? Maybe I should add to my texting, chatting, communication arsenal. I'm learning Kalmoji now. What is a Kalmoji. I do it a lot. So I do when emotes suspicion. I actually don't use like emotes. I just use ASICs stuff, like ASIC emotes. So suspicion. Being witty, maybe. I usually use this for wittiness. And as in, I desire to be wholesome, but it might not be that wholesome. But this is what I use most of the time. Like, I don't know. It's like, it's mutual. I have no idea. I'm like, so this is good, right? Suspicion, right? I'm adjusting. But that's what I had been thinking about yesterday. It's pretty... This is a deep conversation. It can go real... The rabbit hole is deep, I mean, sorry. The rabbit hole can get very, very deep on this one. Anyways, where do we even start on this topic? Oh, the idea of using negation. The idea of using negation as a way to create ambiguity. And now we have people making statements and then using a tone shift to introduce ambiguity. Pretty popular in Japan, you believe? Oh, is it a very specific type of, like, is it an evolution of emojis? Oh, those things. Oh, that's what they're called? So I guess I guess I use some form of that. It's kind of like that, but I have a rudimentary. Yeah, I use rudimentary versions of this. I see. I didn't realize that's what they're called. Yeah, I use very rudimentary versions of this. Intriguing. Yeah, texting, it can get pretty creative. I don't use them much myself. Yeah, I don't know how to enter the fancy things. At all. The closest I get is like a Kirby or something, you know, like sorry, I'm using my mouse, so it takes a while, right? And then like I don't know, insert an emote. Then I would use an emoji of like a bow or something, right? Right. That's as close as possible. But this still can qualify for like an ASICs thing because it's only using the basic characters that are on a English keyboard. I don't know any shortcuts for like a filled in dot or like a side dot, like a quarter filled dot. I don't know any of those shortcuts or how people entered them so quickly. Maybe they're macros or shortcut keys for preloaded stuff. I have no idea. Emotes though, emotes. What is all the rage in the Twitch space, for example? I'm not sure if the Twitch space, I'm not sure if the YouTube space has these. Dej. Any judges? Like any jizz? Like the GEs? These are all the rage at this point for the Twitch space. So Dej would be one of them. I mean, I don't even know if Bedge is a thing. I'm sure Bedge is the thing. So anything that has this kind of truncation. It's like the wave that came from like Pepka and Papega and stuff. You don't think you're cool enough for that? I'm not cool enough for that. Yeah, I'm not cool enough for that. Whenever I say it, I feel like I'm out of place. Oh, 考文写. Wait. Oh, emoji. Oh, Calmoji. Oh, that makes sense. That's Calmoji. Face, writing, character. Face, write, character. Neat. Wonder what it is in Chinese. I was thinking I immediately wanted to say something in Chinese. Oh, no, never mind. It's not the same. What? Yeah. 表情. 表情符号. What the? Okay, it's not close. I think the... Oh, which by the way, emoji as well came from Japanese. So, I don't think that originated from... So emoticons, like things dealing with that, might end up being a lot more Japanese friendly than other places. Anyways. Neat. Yeah, emoji. Yep. Yeah. So the moji part is originated in Japanese. The moji. And then English adopted that word. Emoji. I'm kind of curious if they say emoji. Probably emoji, but all good. Anyways, good talk. Good digression. Now, you know, I welcome everyone to disagree with me, as in produce null hypothesis testing. So test these theories, right? Test these observations. Are you able to read literally picture character? Yep. Right character. Right character. So face, the picture for Yeah. Oh, emoji. Oh yeah, that makes sense. It's the in... Oh, that makes so much sense. The comes from emoji. Oh, yeah, Iris. That makes so much sense now. What you call it? And hear me out here. I'm not suggesting that all the things I'm saying are statistically accurate and or is the truth. These are my own personal anecdotal observations. So, much like the whole topic itself, go out there and form null hypothesis for my statements. Are you able to find statistically that people don't use when they have a negative comment? How frequently do they associate when they're talking to someone, like in agreement or something? How often when they say a negative comment do they use a positive emoji? It's quite revealing, in my opinion. If you don't see it too often, then I would love to know where this is. I think it's really fun to challenge people's notions in a way that helps inform these observations, because it could also be a pre-selection thing, right? Like the places I go to happens to do this more often, and there's pre-selection. But boy howdy, sometime there was a time when it's like are you being sarcastic? It's like, oh yeah, you're so good, Kappa. You see what I mean? Like, it's a positive statement and then a negative emoji for sarcasm, right? Or like, oh, I don't think that's right, smile. It's definitely a very popular mechanic. Not that I'm not sure if it has changed recently. And then here's one to consider in the future. What happens when someone puts 2 kappas at the end of a statement as opposed to 1 kappa? Sarcasm is so tough to do right in writing form. Yeah, it's one of those things. It's fun to talk about because it's difficult, if you know what I mean. It's nebulous, so I like to think that ideas that when they're spurious and nebulous, they're very interesting to talk about. If they're exact and always true, well, I guess we can all agree and be less interested in talking about it, if you know what I mean. There are ways to talk about factual things that may be intellectually stimulating. Like one party doesn't know the fact, and then the other party is informing the fact. That can be interesting to one party, and it could be interesting to the other party teaching that stuff. So that's a situation where you could have that being interesting. But generally, less room for discussion, right? I've used a lot of these tricks. I don't know what you call them. Um, over the years, since I spent most of my time, I would say 80% of my human interactions are where I read text and I'm the speaker, right? So, over time, when you're when you're constantly reading a lot of text, one of the skills that I feel like I should practice is how to extract as much nuances to writing or reading the written form as much as I can. Like you can choose not to, which I think a lot of people do, because they feel like, well, if we really wanted to learn about each other, we would eventually talk to each other, like in IRL or deeper into DMs. Like, yeah, certainly. However, that doesn't mean you can't do both. Like, there will be opportunities where you can get to know people, but you only have you only have so many opportunities to know people. So, in the case of this, I like to test my presumptions and my deductions, using rigorous like testing and deducing and whatnot. So maybe one day we will see, we could test this in a more like direct way, like when someone types something and then I would try to explain the undertones of where I think the statement's going, right? Over time I think one becomes a more effective, I would, this is my personal preference, I believe that I become a more effective communicator in terms of this situation where you're the streamer and the other people predominantly text you, right? You can make someone feel that you're on the same page and or create deliberate intrigue with less effort from the person who's typing. So the idea is, lots of times now my frequency of explaining things without the other person having to say, oh yeah, by the way, I wanted to add this, and I'm already saying the thing, right? I think it breeds a lot of reward or confirmation for me when I'm explaining something and then suddenly someone was already typing that sentiment. And that's kind of where I'm going with this. It's it can be very, it's a useful party trick, I'm gonna say, quote unquote. Sometimes it's a useful party trick. Although I do this when I talk to other people too. Like you read their body language, you try to read their, all the intonation changes, the pitch accent, the changes of their speed and cadence, right? And then how they move and stuff. I love that stuff. IRL or like face-to-face kind of chatting is something that I don't have a lot of time for, but generally speaking, it's except it keeps me making it obvious that I'm paying attention to the other person. And I think that is something that can be incredibly valuable if you are ever interacting with people on a daily basis. Being able to constantly try to push your abilities and practice your abilities to be able to communicate with people, whether they believe the medium they're using is limited or not, right? It keeps them, at least I feel that is one of the more consistent ways to allow someone to know that, well, you really care. And how do you show it? Well, oftentimes people think you can only show that you care. You can't use words to show that you care. Imagine that. When you're, imagine there, people say this a lot to me, more than I feel that I expect. So from one of the sentiments oftentimes is when someone says they are unable to express something in text or with words, right? Because we're a language learning channel now. They're unable to explain in words. They would suggest that, oh, well, I'm not going to try because you can't. As in, oh, you can't communicate certain things in words. We must meet IRL. And I'm like, okay, I agree with that. That there are things we can't do in text. That's IRL. I have no problem with that. Now, hear me out here. Let me try to challenge the notion that we can still learn a lot of things about each other through the use of speech. The reason why I say this is the irony here is so many people, there are quite a lot of people who suggest that speech is not powerful. It's cheap. Writing and texting and using language is cheap compared to doing things. And I totally get that from a older cultural standard, as in a standard in which the predominant form of communication in one's life is not through speech or writing or text. In fact, I can reasonably argue that while they might not be aware, I think people still treat written language and writing and posting and stuff as cheaper, as in less consequential, right? You're less responsible for what you write and post online, because it's not like the real thing where you're in person committing to an act, like a physical act. And my rebuttal to that is, my argument to that is, why am I spending an hour talking about these things and these observations? It's largely because, okay, if people think it's not a big deal, they don't think about their written language, and yet you use a medium, right? You use a medium with nearly 9 out of 10 times, you're using written language to communicate. That's an untapped use case. So if you go around saying, oh, it's no big deal, I don't need to learn about written nuances and the communication of written language, and you're on the internet, that to me is borderline cognitive dissonance. So you're suggesting that you should not improve or look at the impact of your understanding of written language when it consumes nearly 90% of your interactions with other human beings. So no, in my opinion, as a strong push towards that person, would you say then your communication skills are deficient or under practice if you in your daily life? Because when you type a statement like, I don't disagree, smile, thumbs up, what is the limitations of that? Like, have you considered the limitation of that? And I don't think that status quo have changed at all. Where in the world of the internet, written language is still second class to spoken language and like in-person interactions. However, it's all of the above. You can improve, nonverbal communication and speech and whatnot alongside written language. But written language has cheapened all the time, even though it is now the primary source of interaction. Like back in the day when people say, well, you talk the talk, but do you walk the walk? You can kind of do that now. Like, for example, someone says, oh, you say a lot of things. Show me that you can do them. All right. Pull out your smartphone, do it, post it to the internet, I guess. You can definitely do that now. It's getting closer to that. However, the primary thing is people talking at each other with written language. So, I would say it's very pragmatic to learn how to deduce people's written language patterns or like status quos and cultural trends in written language, largely due to the nature that I think the vast majority of communication is still through written language now on the internet, right? Specifically talking about the internet. So when I'm thinking about learning another language, the thought is, here's the big kicker. Here's my punchline, right? This connects with me forum diving recently about the value of written language versus the value of spoken language, right? And the big kicker here is, much like, my discussion about writing, it's like, oh, do you write kanji or do you type kanji? Well, writing is not important because you spend most of your time typing. Okay, hear me out. So then why are you complaining about typing this read correctly, correctly to get the correct character as not a big deal compared to spoken language, when most of the time you're using the written language, right? It's in the same argument, by the way. It's someone who is complaining about WaniKani being too strict by saying, in the beginning, you're like, well, why does it matter if I say Joe and Joel, right? Joe, and Joel. And if I type it, like, it's close enough. And it was very difficult for a lot of other individuals to communicate that this is very important as a written language, right? We're learning written language, and that written language results in very different things. Where does that all come from? It's humorous because while they're talking about the nuances and the importance of Joe and Joel, right? Joe and Joel, or new and new, they're using English. The way they're making arguments about the English, it demonstrates that while everyone talks about the small details in Japanese because things are still simple, like quote unquote, or less complicated, they're learning the language. They're using English that are incredibly habitually ambiguous and negative, and demonstrates that they don't care. Like, they don't treat English, it's a double standard. They don't treat English using their words and stuff in the same way, right? There's like typos, and then someone made an example like, well, wouldn't you get upset if someone wrote read and it accidentally wrote read, right? You're like, wouldn't you be upset? Like, these are different words, right? So Joe, right? Joe, Joe and Joel are two different things, right? That was like more of a person getting to learn the early things, and my first thought was, yeah, that's funny, but the way the person was presenting their case using English demonstrated that they don't care about it either. Because when they were typing and they chose specific words, and I'm like, oh yeah, that's close enough, and I'm like, okay. It's funny. I don't know. In the future, we can. I'm not sure how I'm gonna go about this, but in the future, I'm thinking about like reading comments, like comments in Japanese and comments in Chinese. So I was thinking I do like a segment or bit where I would go through like subreddits or Reddits of different languages, you know, with some courtesy filters. I would take like screenshots and then do like courtesy filters and then read like comments so I could understand more of the written language, the how people communicate online using the target language, right? And this might not be important to other people who say, oh, well, I plan on going to Japan and talk to real people. And I'm like, okay, so the internet is not real people. Fair enough. I can accept your premise, provided that you have to understand that the internet is another form of communication and you have to kind of get into that groove at some point. You might be thinking, perhaps right now, it's like nonsense. People wouldn't say that, right? These are actual anecdotal conversations I have with people where when someone says something like, I only focus on talking natural Japanese and speaking natural Japanese. So when I go to Japan, I can speak to real people. I'm like, okay, so does that exclude what I'm talking about, internet and writing and stuff? It's like, well, yeah, because only the real Japanese people speak Japanese on the streets. And I'm like, so I will never be a real person. Okay, I got it. Or something like that. Because I was being facetious. Because it was very ironic that you don't learn both the parts, right? Anyways. That could be fun. Well, thanks for another fun, enriching conversation. I'll leave you for your reviews for tonight. Keep up the good work. Yeah, you too. You too, Gecko. It's always been a pleasure. I think I look forward to these daily reviews. Maybe in the future we could make it into a thing. Ja ne. Oyasumi nasai, Gecko. Alright. Today is a short lesson, so we're a short review session, so let's get cracking on this. So 1,000 crosses, right? Sliding off into 1,000 crosses, it hurts. My mnemonic for this is 1,000 needles, death by 1,000 cuts, right? Death by 1,000 cuts. So if you imagine a person sliding and then hitting 1,000 crosses, it's like getting jabbed by 1,000 things. So that's where the 1,000 comes from. Important. You gotta wear a tie to something important. Treasure. X marks the spot. Stop sign. Or they are talking about when you see something in the way, you would stop for it, right? You would stop for it. Actually, I think there's more to that. Oh yeah, no. Yeah, it's stuff in the way, like a giant toe and stuff. Yeah. I think of lampposts and streetlights in an intersection. This is the side silhouette profile of an intersection, right? At least near a corner of an intersection or an approaching intersection. Okay. I didn't think of something. Oh no. Just could I, right? Could I get something? This is an exclamatory. And it's a pass. Crown, right? Crown. Like powering up. To lift something. That's not lifting. That's lowering. It's a saw. Saw. That's fine. That was a little premature. That was saw. Saw was the mnemonic. Sageru. Funny looking hand. This is the right? To life something. Why do I keep typing life? That's the third day I type life. Hoteru. Sorry. One day I'm gonna write one day I'm gonna hit enter. This is dirt. Right. I keep typing cage, so it's prison. Right. Water. Vocabulary meaning. So, this is people at Tofugu counting people by their genes, right? The number of genes. And I screwed this up. It was saw, right? Just saw something down is to lower something. And rock and roll. Black mages. Counting people by their genes. Co and co. What did we use with this? Oh, mocking. That came out pretty quick. Mocking. MAKU. MAKU white. This is the drop on the sun. Pass. Straight. Have you found any of the mnemonics helpful so far? I think they're most of them are pretty fun. I keep most of them. I think the ones that I didn't find, it's probably more of a thing. The ones that didn't empathize with me. So far, no boy for Nobodu. Nobodu is tough. I talked about this with Gecko. This is Gecko and I talked about this the beginning of today. So far, no boy, the mnemonic no boy is tough. So I've added Kratos. So I'm making the mnemonics helpful. If they aren't helpful. So far there are only 3 that really show up that I pause on. So right now, as I'm doing these reviews, I'm seeing how quickly I come up with a shortcut mnemonic, right? Like a shortcut mnemonic that use Ko's thing and me combined, or in any way, shape, or form. Sometimes I keep the mnemonic as is. Sometimes I add more to it, right? The ones that aren't immediately super fast, I'm writing down now, and I'm writing a mental note of how I can make the mnemonic helpful. So pretty much all of the mnemonics are helpful, largely because I make them helpful. So when one is less effective than the other, I would change the mnemonics myself on top of what Ko has written. So they're the point of inspiration. So for Nobodu, Nobodu is supposed to climb, and you think about climbing like a mountain, right? And the mnemonic was someone telling the person, no boys are not, shouldn't climb mountains. So no boy, no bodu. And my thought was, and then their argument was, oh well, you're not a boy anymore, you're no boy, you're a man, and that now you can climb the mountain. However, that wasn't strong enough because it was kind of a negative thing, a negative statement. So now I think of Kratos telling I keep forgetting his name. I should remember Kratos. Atreus. Yeah, Atreus. So if you ever played like God of War games, the most recent ones by Santa Monica Studios, right? Atreus keeps being called boy. And all I imagine is Kratos saying, no boy, you should not climb the mountain alone, right? That kind of thing. So now the mnemonic is a little bit, it's probably going to be a little bit more to speed. And I'm basically normalizing all the mnemonics by combining my own on top or not. And the one that was really a stretch, which me and Gecko talked about earlier, was Nuyoku. So Nudoku is the read or input, right? Like you input something. And the mnemonic goes that it's a combination of you input with all your strength. And when you're working for like a tech company, maybe like Tofugu or something, you input things, right? With all your strength. And as your career goes, they may place new locks, so new roku, on your career, and that was a mnemonic, right? Like you get new locks on your career, and I'm like, yeah. Like I gotta read it again, but we'll look at it again. So instead, I changed it to when you're inputting, like you have a career that deals with inputting, right, on a computer and stuff. So say you're a CS major, and you input something. Well, you're doing a great job with all your strength, right? You're inputting with all your strength in order to unlock new locks of opportunity. So you're unlocking new locks of opportunity, like on doors and stuff. And that's how I remember new roku for the mnemonic read for input. It's a roundabout way, but generally speaking, it's still using Ko's mnemonic, only now I'm adding to it so that it becomes helpful or more helpful. Not that it's any not helpful. However, it's not helpful enough per se for my speed, right? And then eventually it'll change. Like for that, now I say CS input new opportunities. Those are my new locks opportunities. So that's my mnemonic for new roku, which new roku is a new vocabulary word for me. So I do not know that vocabulary before, and that's kind of an idea of how my mnemonics end up developing, right? So on top of it, or as we get more vocabulary that I'm unfamiliar with, those mnemonics will be a combination of Ko and mine. When it comes to radicals, I simply say the one word that is not the word that this is. So for me here is ground barb. Ground barb is street. Because the mnemonic is technically you see a ground and it's barbed to the ground. That's what streets are composed of, right? So barbs underneath the ground. So when I see street, I see barb ground, and all of them are. Hear me out here. Is it Gecko asked me yesterday about this. Is it significantly more helpful since I'm going backwards, right? That's what Gecko used the word backwards, because sometimes if I don't remember the mnemonic, I already know the answer, right? So I take the answer to remember the mnemonic, and that's kind of like going backwards. Like you're remembering more things than you have to on the thing. And to me, if you say, have you found any mnemonics helpful so far? Not only if your goal when you're asking, oh, does this help you learn Japanese faster, right? Not only is it not helpful, it's increased my amount of time in things that I need to remember. If your objective is only to learn Japanese. So, in fact, I'm going slower than I would normally go because I'm not focused on the task of needing to know the meaning of these characters or these radicals, because I know what they mean in context already. However, the fun part about WaniKani is, like Gecko and I would agree prior, is that we get to learn Ko's mnemonic, right? We get to learn what this guy, who clearly knows more Japanese than I do, who spends their entire life and career, maybe for like over 10 years now, how do they write a mnemonic? And that's what I'm farming right now. So it has been very helpful to me to see how other people form mnemonics. This is a way to say that I get to learn how other language learners or people who have learned the Japanese language already, how do they create constructs in order to get them to learn something? And because I get that exposure, I can in the future be able to either teach, use it myself, or offer it as inspiration for others. Because I'm more into the learning aspect than the progress Yeah. So, with that said, based on your question, I'm going to say no, they're not helpful based on what you probably feel is valuable. Now, and then my addition is it's helpful because I'm getting to learn how another person voluntarily teaches. And that's one of my favorite things about learning. You not only have an opportunity to learn the thing yourself, you also get to learn how other people learn in the process. And it's been a very long time. I miss learning something where someone else is also learning and teaching something. That used to be my favorite thing in universities. We sit down, there'll be like 6 of us, and all of us would have different opinions in doing approaches to teaching our material. And then we would critique each other on how we write this and how we interpret this. And that's what makes the university environment, it improves everyone around. The collective becomes stronger and more dynamic and more intellectually challenging and creative in a sense, when that is the normal environment. However, on the internet, you can't do that. It's very difficult, right? When you play a video game, the closest thing I can get to is trying to figure out what the developer was thinking when they made this particular feature. And in this case, in terms of anime and manga, you get to learn a little bit about the writer, the artist, through their work. It's one thing that I would rewatch a movie if I, like, for example, get to see a interview, like let's just say Ko had an interview with a podcaster, much like the CEO of Duolingo has an interview with a podcaster, and they answer a couple of questions and they talk about something. I get to learn something about them, and immediately I would go back to their products and see if either it's the same, it's concordant with their vision or not. So yesterday when I was talking about Duolingo and the vision of Duolingo with like Bako, I think that was the person's name, or Barrio, Baro, I forgot the user's name, but there were a couple people who were talking about how like one person still uses Duolingo even though they hate it, and that same person uses Anki, right? Because they're a diehard Anki fan. And I was able to talk about Duolingo through the lens and the purpose of the CEO, what the CEO is saying, and then what their product is doing, and then they're concordant with each other, along with considering counter arguments, like things that it doesn't do. And that's been very helpful to me, because since I no longer work at a university, I no longer get a chance to see how people create mnemonics. Like, how do you study? I ask this is my first 2 or 3 questions every single time I meet someone. Like, oh, hey, are you interested in language learning? If so, like, what kind of language are you learning? And may I ask why you're learning this language? And then they would say something. It's like, so how are you going about it? Right? It's a little bit depending on their response. But how are you going about it? Because I want to understand how other people are learning, because all of that could be helpful. Right? So this is very helpful. Hanzahiro, though. Hanzahiro has a different approach, and I quite love it too. Lots of people lots of people, as in the people who pre-select themselves into Hanzahiro, are usually already familiar with WaniKani, hence why I put them next to each other. It's no coincidence that I started WaniKani and immediately, like a week later, I start Hanzahiro. Lots of people who make comments on Hanzahiro's forum is largely with WaniKani experience. So the early days, people are constantly like, oh, these two are exactly identical, right? But in terms of SRS, maybe it's mechanically similar and all the mechanical things, but their mnemonics are not the same. And gives me a really wonderful, like, indirect way of saying, if Ko ever wants an interview, for example, Koichi, right? Ever want an interview? I have so many burning questions for him because the mnemonics are helpful in the sense that I would love to ask him what are his motivations in creating very specific mnemonics, like the what's going on with the new locks, like, mnemonic. What the deal? What was the deal with that? And we would like banter about. So, did you have any other ideas that you were gonna use? And that's kind of the cool part. So whenever you watch like an anime, right? For example, someone watching anime, I'm more interested in what they thought about the anime. Like the person I'm talking to, what are their thoughts about the anime? And then what are their thoughts about the like the person who made the anime, right? Talking about people and how they go about doing things is very, very helpful to me. It's the skill that if I'm doing the same thing for, arguably, if I'm doing the same thing for 600 days, I'm not actually doing the same thing for 600 days, because with every new thing or every person that I interact with, the whole goal was to understand the person. Learning Japanese on the side, the semantics of Japanese, that's great. It's an extra. Learning how to say arigatou gozaimasu with the nuances of understanding the person I'm talking to, like a Japanese person or a language learner. That is why these things are helpful, at least in my opinion, personally. That's a big stretch in terms of the mnemonics, but yeah, hopefully that's a long answer. The short answer is probably not helpful. I'm actually slowing down, so how in terms of the pragmatic goal of learning new vocabulary words, but I'm enjoying myself even more than I've ever had, because now this is something different. I get to investigate and learn how someone else believes how people should learn vocabulary or kanji. Would I use this approach if these things don't exist? I'd probably use this approach. This is very close to something I have used and taken to adulthood. So mechanically speaking, not outside the mnemonics, the mechanics of it, I've already incorporated this manually in Duolingo. How I go about reviewing and predicting or gauging when I'm going to forget things, and then looping and testing when I'm going to forget things, right? And then adding recall and review at the end and creating a schedule. That's something before the age of convenience like technology. You had to be able to do all of this in the first place, right? In order to get a college degree before the internet, you didn't have these conveniences. So you learn how to do these things already. So in the long run, even the SRS system is not helpful to me. Like, if you strictly speaking from a pragmatic standpoint, these tools are not doing things I don't know how to do myself. In contrast, if you're still in high school and you're considering going to college, or like you're someone who's younger, nowadays, those skills are not being developed yet, or may not ever be developed because of technology. And what WaniKani does is remove the need to do that. So it is helpful because you don't know how to do that yet. It is not helpful if you already know how to do that, if you're speaking pragmatically speaking, right? Like super objective, right? If you're trying to be objective, if you already know how to study and, do your time and like plan your things, an SRS system is superfluous. It does things that you already know how to do. Does it save you enough time? That could be helpful. Saving some time is helpful. However, in terms of intellectual development, it's probably not helpful. In fact, it might actually make it even worse. And what I mean by that is, it will make you under-practiced. Do you need to do that? No, not really. If the future is that there'll be an app for all of these SRS things, then maybe that's not a skill that you need to use anymore, right? It's kind of like all the skills that we don't use now. What is one skill we don't use now that maybe a select few do because of extenuating circumstances? Shaking hands. Having to see someone's face to have a deep conversation or have a conversation in general, right? Those are under practice skills, right? They're optional. Writing. WaniKani does not have writing for kanji because it's a skill that has become superfluous due to technology. So, in a way, you can also think of all the things that your tools are doing, and those tools are taking place of the skills that you may or may not have already. And to provide a context for me, I've already done most of these skills most of my life before these tools are available. So the most useful thing, in my opinion, in WaniKani is how Ko and Viet is presenting the information. So the mnemonics is the only reason. It's one of the, basically the number one reason that I have chosen to use WaniKani in Hanzi, with Hanzi Hero, and that is to use the mnemonics. So it is the most helpful thing in WaniKani for a different reason, for a very different reason. Yeah. It's, in my opinion, the most important reason. I don't need to learn about how I would go about learning or what I need to do to learn Japanese. I kind of want to learn what other people are using and how they're going about learning Japanese, right? And that's why you guys are here, or at least that's why I'm so happy to get on stream every day and having the opportunity once in a while for a person to be willing to share their thoughts and how they went about their journey in an analytical way, like in a more self-aware and self-participating way. Not necessarily the ones, I mean, I appreciate the attention, but it's very difficult to find connection with someone who doesn't want to share or hasn't really been very attentive in their life or interest in their own life. Like, oh, I just break out my Anki deck and I grind the Anki deck and trust the process. Like, that's fine. That's great. Is there any particular thing that you like or you want to do differently, or do you mix it up? Have you been aware of what is helpful? And the questions you ask is incredibly important. Have you found any of the mnemonics helpful so far? And actually, now I would probably, after like a long digression, I would probably ask you, have you used WaniKani? And also, have you found any of the mnemonics helpful, right? Or how, and in what way and why was it helpful? Mine is because I get to see someone else's, almost like see someone else's notes even. You have not used WaniKani? I see. Like, I love looking at other people's notes, like what they're doing, like how are they doing it. I think it's unfortunate and not as exciting anymore to me, unlike others. This is an unpopular opinion. I don't like seeing just the results. It's not important to me. Like, it's important. It could be satisfying, but it's rarely the most informative thing. So when someone says, I built this, it's like, I'm like, how? How did you build this? Why did you build this? I want to hear it. But generally speaking, there's not enough time for that, you know? So someone would say, I wrote this song. Step 1, write the song. Ta-da! 5 minutes later, here's the song. I'm like, okay, so did you... I hear this motif here. So maybe they use this motif because it reminds them of spring. This part sounds like a harpsichord. Maybe they have a fascination with Baroque period instrumentation because harpsichord is really popular then, that kind of thing. So it's up to me to figure out all the little bits and pieces of that person. It's also super interesting if they show me how it's done. That is an unpopular opinion because nowadays people don't want to watch how it was done or how it was produced. The vast majority of people prefer to see the product finished. Cue the person who gets really upset when someone makes a mistake because they're practicing and studying a new language. They're like, oh, it's so frustrating. Why can't you be a know-it-all like me? I'm like, well, that's because that person's learning and studying. Like, where do you think that comes from, right? You use remembering the kanji. Oh, how does remembering the kanji work, Iris? Oh, interesting. It's a book. Oh, wait, I do remember this. This is Hasix. Yes, James Hasix. Yes. The Kevin, the developer of Hanzahiro, talked specifically about contrasting his approach in Hanzahiro to Hasix's approach to remembering characters. Hasix actually published multiple resources, and that's become popularized to remembering the Hanzi and Kanji characters because they're mutually shared. Interesting. I forgot that's the title of the book series. Yeah, Hasix. Intriguing. Was there anything particular? You only use the first book. How many books are there? And then how are you going about remembering kanji now? You use the methods that they like. Did James Hasix introduce you with like particular methods that then you just apply to everything else? I don't actually know how other than what Kevin covered, but it was very cursory, so I don't really know how his approach really works, actually. You still use mnemonics. Okay. I see. How do you construct the mnemonics? So for reading, you just learn vocabulary. Oh, okay. When you learn the vocabulary, I imagine then it's vocabulary by context of like within the you do vocabulary discovery by using your foundations in Japanese now. Like Krashen's comprehensible input kind of approach. What was this? How do we sorry. What was the mnemonic for this? Let's make a note about this. Oh, yams. The mnemonic was yams. Right. To construct a mnemonic, you make a story with all the components of the kanji plus the meaning. Ah, yeah. Yep. Sounds about right. Hanzahiro did that's their approach. and they integrate even further and go with pinyin and whatnot as well. So integrate all the reads in on top of that as well. So there's a lot of parallelisms between the additional layer on top of the SRS with WaniKani and Hanzahiro and James Hazek's published approach to character. And for me, since I started with Duolingo, I already did that. So I did that because it's not a coincidence that after going through a formal education, you end up relying on creating mnemonics for remembering abstraction and then trying to internalize it afterwards. Because all these characters and all these meanings are abstracts before they become internalized. So when you're remembering things like medical terms, right? That's kind of where the SRS came from. And then a layer on top of that is the mnemonics, as in the flashcard construction. It's usually a combination of the two for myself personally over time. So how do you remember like a concept of the colligative properties of water, for example, or how does mapping the light path through a concave mirror looks like? You can ultimately use abstractions using mnemonics to remember a story about it, and then eventually you internalize the meaning through application, right? So you learn something, you learn it as an abstract concept, use mnemonics to make it relatable, and then over time when you apply that knowledge, it becomes internalized. Or you don't apply that knowledge and do not retain it with mnemonics, then it's forgotten, right? So like, do people still know how to do the first derivative of a differential equation, for example? I don't. I can say the first derivative of a differential equation because I generally have an idea, my mnemonics, on where to start. However, I didn't use it enough in my life to make it a permanent thing. So I still rely on mnemonics to connect those concepts together. I'm not a mathematician, and I rarely ever go into like differential equations. That's a it's a very deep branch of calculus. So I did not have to use differential equations. That kind of thing. The method of this is a site plug for learning a different language, right? When you learn a different language, oftentimes the people who encourage or want to incorporate learning different languages and like a secondary language as a form of enrichment for kids, this is the plug for it. Largely all the concepts and the things that the way you go about enhancing and learning large quantities of abstraction or data, or the semantics, that type of skill can be extrapolated to other types of learning. So learning a language is, in all fairness, reduced to two objectives for most people. Usually it's reduced to one objective, which is if you're learning Japanese, the goal and objective is to learn Japanese. However, if you haven't ever learned a language before, and say you're not college educated or you didn't like learning in general, if learning Japanese is enough to get you to learn, you explore learning strategies. And those learning strategies are not, in my opinion, unique to learning a language. So then it goes full circle and you start thinking, so why should kids be forced or obligated or to strongly encouraged to learn another language? It's largely another avenue, another opportunity for them to engage in the learning process in addition, right? the more opportunities, the more options you're given to a child to explore learning opportunities, the more likely they're going to develop learning strategies in different ways. So if English, for example, is not that interesting to you, like some people think English is very mundane, yet they're native speakers, and they would prefer to learn Japanese when they were younger, that is enough motivation to create a learning experience that may be mirrored by their, that may compensate or complement their lack of interest in their own primary language, for instance. And that will still induce constructive strategies, problem solving, and critical thinking in learning strategies. Now, the difference here that I would raise a bit of contrast is there is also a difference between coming up with the strategy that involves active problem solving and being told what that strategy is. Nevertheless, once someone enters an application process of the strategy, the end results can be very similar, despite not practicing a specific skill set. So one of the specific skill sets that are very different, that is under practice in someone who's instructed on how to study versus someone who had to trial and error to study in the first place. So I'm a product of an earlier time period where I had to troubleshoot how to study, like how to make flashcards, that work for me, right? Formal education challenges you to problem solve that. In the day of modern technology with available information, being explicitly corrected, explicitly told how to do things also means you work faster, you get the job done faster if it works, right? If it doesn't work, you do not have the problem solving skills to make it work. That's one of the trade-offs, right? You save time, you're more efficient, someone has already done it, this is the explicit way to do it, you find the correct method that suits you. However, you do not use any of the creative process involved. So there's no like construction of the technique, there's no tweaking of the technique. There is a possibility that that person will go on to tweaking the techniques, and that enters problem solving territory. It's optimization, being creative, constructing, right? So that the nice thing about mnemonics is you at least enter a form of construction. So I think HASICS is a source that is quite excellent because it encourages someone to progressively enter a state of construction. Why is this important? Is largely there's an ongoing dialogue about, especially in WaniKani oftentimes in Hanzahiro, where someone says, I want this tool to do exactly this because I believe this is the only way that worked for me and I can't possibly imagine it working any other way. I'm paraphrasing because that person wrote like tons of people wrote like large paragraphs analytically comparing hypotheses as opposed to problem solving and saying what else could work, right? It's not you have to null hypothesis test. Is this the only way it can work? The answer is probably no. For the most part, it's a lot easier to refute an only statement than it is to consider all the other possibilities. And that is a constructive creative process that rarely is practiced nowadays. So this kind of goes back to your first question about how if the mnemonics are helpful here. Ko is making mnemonics, but in no way will I ever think that mnemonics is the only thing that I will be reading, right? When I read a mnemonic, I'm thinking about all my existing mnemonics because I'm also a person who's problem solving. When it comes to studying, there's passive learning and there's active learning. Passive learning
is you're wishing a tool does all the thinking for you and you just follow along without needing to improve it, iterate on it, evaluate your sub beyond what the tool is offering. Now, there is a pseudo level of language learning. Language learning is challenging enough by default. Language learning is challenging enough to eventually push someone to problem solve beyond one thing. So that to me is the realization that this person has tackled problem solving in their lives and or have done as a result of language learning. So the moment when someone says, "Oh, I like Duolingo for these following reasons. However, Duolingo does not do these following reasons. Therefore, in order to get these three things, I will consult this tool, which does these things, but it still lacks this thing, which then I will get a third tool to complement that." That is problem solving. But it's problem solving aided, right? And the lower the aid, the greater your problem solving has to become in order to solve a problem in which there isn't a solution already prepared, right? So what does that look like? Answering a scientific question that no one knows the answers to, and you are going out to answer that. Creating a product that you see that a lot of people need, but that none of them have considered. That is the epitome of problem solving, where there is no longer someone providing aid, but only converging observations. And that's largely why science, in my opinion, is part of the curriculum for a growing child, right? Like a child, when you go to high school, one of the things that the scientific part is trying to impart is more or less the scientific method. However, the scientific method, even at a younger age, seems like a prescription list, as in reading a textbook and telling you exactly what you need to do in order to be successful. That forms the foundations of something you can problem solve and optimize. So when you get to like university and then you get into graduate studies, or you go out in the you go out in the world with other people and other experts, you realize that most of the things you learn were only foundational, and that they have many, many permutations and iterations. And at some point, with all that information experience, you create an emergent property. And unless you choose not to, obviously, you don't have to become this. You don't have to be a leader. You don't have to be a creative person. You can choose to be one, though. And one of the hallmark benefits of being a creative person and constantly developing, even when you're saying like, "Oh, but this wheel, it works so good. Why do you have to reinvent the wheel, though?" Practice problem solving, right? So at the end of the day, if I'm not learning anything from something, if I'm not like what I do, I'm learning something from it. So the default question oftentimes is, which would be curious, is when someone asks me, what am I learning from this? I often wondered if they have a guess as to why. For the record, I explain most of this stuff in the day one. Before I start a project, I predict or evaluate what am I getting from this. And I've already said that the main motivation for WaniKani and Hanzahiro is to replace, the pragmatic thing is to replace a void in my SRS. So I need something that's very convenient, that fills in a review role, and also the mnemonics. So, and that's all I'm looking forward to, right? Not good. Excellent question, and thanks for sharing, by the way. I'm glad to see that you only needed the first book set. What is the second book? Like, what does the second book cover then? And how many books are there in the RTK series of books? I don't actually know. Like, do most people only use the first book? Kanji reading. This is it looks like a no and a ma put together, which I don't. That's not what I. But that's fine. Wait, where did they get the no and the ma from? I still don't see it very obviously. Oh, you put the no up here and then the ma. Oh, okay. I see. Okay. The second focuses on Jimeyu kanji, and the third one focuses on readings, but no one uses them. Oh, okay. Fair enough. Oops. Repeater. Pass. That's a radical, so moon. What was the mnemonic? Oh yeah, the moon running away from the sun. Yeah, the moon running away from the sun. Passive meaning. Wait, did I already get this? Oh no, I got the read and prematurely incorrectly. But this is the meaning, so. On a roll? On Narwhal. Pass. Nietzsche? Nietzsche? Pass. Or, not pass, but they're radicals. Bow. It looks like a bow. Self-explanatory. I should say pictorial next time. It's pictorial. Or, self-explanatory. Right. Maybe like picture or something. This is also picture. Picture. What was this for? Picture, right? Yes, it's picture. Oh, just kidding. Ohio, going to Ohio and saying good morning to a lot of people. Picture. Picture. Oh, actually, no. This one was a barb through a small fish. And evening containing water. Holding water. Okay. Let's do the others. I guess time has eclipsed. Entrance, Gucci store. It's Erie. Erie, Gucci store. Whoops. Entrance. Make sure I don't typo. Kuchiko. Right. Artificial intelligence. I typically use artificial intelligence, but this one was genes don't grow on trees, right? Genes don't grow on trees. Do you still use Duolingo or Japanese, or are you making a certain green hour very angry? No, I still use Duolingo. Right now I'm in the review process. So, every other day I'm doing alternating between Japanese and Chinese right now because the sessions are too long for my voice. I have to cover and review like 6 or 7 units every other day for my review. So I have a review coming up that's going to be a three-part review where I cover over 34 mnemonic constructs from memory. And I need to remember all those mnemonic constructs again. So that deals with me writing a lot. And I wasn't going to stream those things because it would take a very, very long time. It'd be very difficult. So difficult to juggle with speaking and whatnot. It'll be me writing the constructs. And if you wanted to see what all the constructs are, it's basically like at the beginning of every new unit there will be a new construct. So imagine doing like for WaniKani, imagine like 600 review exercises in one day. That's pretty much what I'm doing at the moment. Only it's one big mnemonic. So to give you an idea right now, right? Duolingo Japanese is at 300 days. And Duolingo Chinese has concluded actually, but it's at 200 days. And in both cases, it's been 100 days since I've done a review. This is the longest period I've ever done. The last periods were 50-day periods, and they were okay. They were largely okay. I still had like a 90%-ish. But 100 days seemed like it's hitting like an 80% retention. And 80% largely because this 100 days, I started creating full constructs. We started to lean in on this construct, which I will go over in the review. Since it's 100 days, it's 3 days per unit, right? 3 days per unit. So there are roughly 30, I'm rounding up, there are 34 units. So each unit contains about 20, actually it's upper now, it's like about 30 elements. So imagine 30 cards. Imagine 30 cards. So it's 30 times 34 for each track. So that's about 212. So 212 cards, right? And that's 212 cards each. So I need to review over 212 cards each while producing a logic to them. So the constructs will look something like this, right? So they look like this. And there are about 34 of them for each. And that's what I'm reviewing right now. So Duolingo isn't moving forward yet. Every other day I'm doing a review to see if I can pick up any holes in the stuff. And I have to present where I'm going to do these things in 3 parts. So it's a 3-day parter where I will do like 16 maybe of the not 16, maybe like 14 on day 1, and that's the only session. And then 14 on day 2, and then 6 on day 3, and then I would do my remarks about what I changed, what we're gonna do, because Duolingo Chinese actually ended. However, that doesn't mean I burned all the content. As in, I don't have retention of everything in the Duolingo Chinese course. So how am I going to go about doing that? That's something that I would talk about later. However, the current task is to do this. Kind of like SRS. When you stay too long away, right? Duolingo doesn't operate necessarily on... Duolingo doesn't have an SRS per se. It's static. And the way it's often reinforced is there are lessons. Then the lessons are reinforced by the characters, a character section. This is how I order things. By the character section, and in those character sections will reinforce the lessons again. And you go about this for 3 days. And then in 6 days, I'm recalling a construct that I made myself, which is what you would consider as the mnemonic. And then over time, it's only 6 days. So what is the maximum distance from this mnemonic that I will forget the stuff? And I forgot a lot of stuff. Like, what I mean is, I forgot a lot of stuff from memory. Which is different from this. When a lot of people think of mnemonics, they're thinking about mnemonics with context triggers. So the review that I'm doing, that I'm preparing for, is contextless. So I'm recalling the construct without a trigger. Or trying to without a trigger. The trigger is the construct itself. So something like, I don't know, use, go into make, go into cook, go into food category, and there's 19 elements in a food category. And all of this is going to be written. I've done these reviews before. For Duolingo Japanese, I did it at around 25 days. At first, I started with 25 days. So it was at day 25, 50, 75, and 100. And then I moved to a bigger distance, 150 and 200. And then now the longest one that I have now is 300, because there's the gap of 100 days. So that's what Duolingo is right now. What does this look like? This looks like SRS, right? Basically, you're taking a lot of things, but the difference here is this is new content. So this is 100 days. I'm trying to see how long I can stretch it out using Duolingo's static layout. And so far, the 50 days ones was okay. So even if I was learning 50 days and I implemented like a 6-day cycle on a construct, it was good enough to remember most of the things after 50 days without reviewing them. This is way too long. So it's been taking me a lot longer. That's why Duolingo hasn't showed up as often, because I'm actually using the time to review. I emphasize this most of the time. 95% of the time, whatever's being streamed is learning. It's learning streams. They're all learning streams. So be it video games, etc., they're learning streams. I keep to that mission every single time, because it's 95. There are like 5% of the time. Like tomorrow is a Neverwinter stream. It's something that I'm not actually learning. I'm actually like the 1%. I'm actually the part of the 99th percentile in Neverwinter, because I played this game for over 11 years, right? The difference is most of the time my stream is I'm learning. So I want to keep emphasizing that, because people don't, in my opinion, the vast majority of people are not used to understanding what learning looks like. In my opinion, they think they're learning things, but they're passively learning things. It's constantly passive. And then when they learn passively, how do I tell that they learn passively? Well, they constantly correct me immediately. And believe that that's the only way you can learn, by immediately correcting someone over and over again. To me, that's passive learning. Basically, you click on an answer and it's wrong, right? A system gives you the right answer immediately. You didn't process how you were wrong, why you were wrong, what do you do before and after. Rarely do you ever get that. And it reflects in the person's behavior. It's 99% of the time, I would say. No, that's too bold. I'm gonna say 60% accuracy as a conservative thing. If your behavior immediately is to get triggered by something wrong and you immediately want to correct someone and then you're saying you're helping, then most of your time you're passively learning. And passively learning can still work. It often takes more time, in my opinion. It takes more time and also lots and lots of repeated exposure. So what does SRS do? SRS tries to reduce this. So like Anki's FSRS, for example, is trying to reduce the amount of repeated exposure required. So they're using a way to try to give just enough exposure in which it acclimates to a person staying active in their learning. So the nice thing about free SRS, which I've read about recently in the development, especially in the Anki project, is that it will take into account the person's learning curve. So when SRS, when a person is actively understanding, oh, I don't need to have more exposure, I can reduce the amount of time because they're more actively learning. So at some point, it gets you into the habit of refining your own learning methods, right? You get to test, oh, can you wait longer before a review? Can you increase the density or decrease the density? When you use an SRS, most people passively use an SRS because you're expecting the SRS to do all the work, right? And that's largely why my schedules change and whatnot. Largely because I'm adapting to new volume. So right now we're in the trial period of what is my current schedule for WaniKani and Hanzahiro, while also making management and time for a Duolingo Japanese and Chinese review. And then at the same time, I have to start my Like a Dragon 8 Chinese playthrough and then Japanese playthrough of the MSQ, all before February 20th to do Yakuza Pirate, the game that's coming out soon, or Pirate Yakuza. And then after that, we're doing Duolingo Spanish. That is rotated in with Duolingo Japanese and Chinese. Those are what I'm working on right now. And there's 2 weeks left in Neverwinter. So tomorrow is Neverwinter. That's a Monday. And then the conclusion of the 10th week is the following Monday. So then this cycles out and I will be able to use Monday in a different manner as well. It sounds very, I don't know if this sounds complicated to anyone or anything like that. It's this is my normal state. Like I really like doing these things. I'm like, one of the aspects of being successful at juggling things is to do it, right? I understand that there are other people who prefer not to deal with that, so you can use apps, schedulers, calendars, right? There's lots of technology to help you with that. When I was growing up, I didn't have those things. I had a calendar and I had a pencil, add a pen. So I scheduled all those things. I learned how to manage my time and understand how to tweak my time. So if I were to release a product, for example, an SRS, that SRS would represent what I believe is the most efficacious way that I go about learning. However, with those skills, if you put a tool in front of me, I'm going to make it useful. It's not, the tool is not the thing that determines if it's useful. The person who uses the tool is what they determine if it's useful. So it's a very perspective, a different perspective. So even if I'm not streaming Duolingo Japanese, you bet that I'm keeping Duo a happy burb. Duolingo is a very, very happy burb. You know what? I just realized I forgot to purchase a plushie. I forgot to look if they had a deal on the plushies at the end of the year. Dang it. I thought I forgot something. I was gonna purchase Duo and Falstaff plushies. I guess I'll do that later. Just to give back a little bit. Anyways, that's the answer to that. Today happens to be the off day. Yesterday was doing Duolingo Chinese. Tomorrow is going to be Neverwinter, so we're going to push. I have 7 or less days left before I have to do the review. So when the time comes to review, I will make a disclaimer. Oh, I only had enough time to sufficiently review maybe 20 constructs, and then we'll just use the 20 constructs, right? The idea is, even if it's unfinished, if you didn't reach your goal, all the progress and all the work that you have done up to that point is still presentable, right? And right now, it is tough. It takes me 3 or 4 hours in the evening to get 8 to 10 constructs, fill in all the gaps. There's too many places where I keep thinking, oh no, wait, there's more here. I could say more here. And as long as I'm putting in effort, right, it all contributes to language learning. I will probably talk a lot more about that later, how I managed the time and what worked and what didn't while I was reviewing offline. So I will be talking about the decrease in Duolingo, how did I do it? How did I come to remembering all the constructs? So in a week's time, I'm gonna have to extend it a little bit more, but in a week's time or so, I'll do a demonstration in the first either 2 days or the beginning of 3 days, right? The first 2 days, I'm just going to be doing the demonstration for recording purposes. So 1 day, I'll spend 4 hours recording, constructs only, writing verbatim. And then 2, same thing. And then 3, I'll do maybe half the day or not at all the days, and I'll explain why Duolingo was absent in the rotation more often than not, and where I pushed too hard. And as a teaser, as a spoiler, I did push too hard. My time got compressed so rough that's why I no longer could even do this on top of the other things. So we're gonna scale the stuff back moving forward. But for now, I'm gonna follow through with what my ideas are, and then I will explain to myself and to others who are curious what happens when I basically went too hard, right? I kid you not, these days, on top of the speaking and coming up with ideas and bringing new stories every day when I do a new stream, I don't know if I mentioned this to you when you were around, Iris, but every time I stream, the evening before, I read something and I make a story out of it or an observation out of it. And when I come on stream each day, I pocket that story. And the goal of the story is that when someone mentions something I have multiple stories in my back pocket, as in like my figurative back pocket, which I can bring up at any time. So over time, I've constructed like 100 to 200 stories on average for like 3 months. Every like 3 months, I would have like 100 to 150 stories in my back pocket. And what happens over time is when someone says something, I will have something relevant to say, or something maybe potentially insightful or constructive. And I do this every single evening. However, I can't do that very well while also having to review. So this stuff is pushing me to my limit, and that's good because I needed to know where my limit is. My limit is apparently a 6 to 8 hour stream with 2 or 3 separate things, usually 3. So the limit is 6 to 8 hour stream, 3 separate things to plan, 3 separate stories to bring for each of those sections, and then eating dinner while reviewing for another 8 hours, and then going to bed, and then getting up to run and do the same thing over again for at least 2 weeks. After 2 weeks, I'm absolutely drained. Like, I cannot maintain that anymore. So it's kind of very similar to what I used to do when I was working. I work for 8 to 10 hours. I come home, eat, but then continue working. But I was reviewing then. So I spend like 18 of the 24 hours awake doing work. And I did that for like over a decade. And then eventually like it couldn't hold up anymore. So I'm not that young anymore. And that's kind of the long excuses, or the long answer is I still use Duolingo for Japanese and Chinese. Duo is happy on my phone. The guy is flexing. Yeah, the guy is flexing. However, cannot juggle all of this stuff at the same time. I did a little too much. So we'll have like staggered schedules in the future where Hanzahiro and WaniKani are priority. So they will have a 4-hour slot between the two of them at the beginning, and we're gonna try to figure out the other half of the slot. However, Duolingo Chinese, for all intents and purposes, is no longer a learning source per se, like for Chinese itself, because there isn't anything left. It can get updated though. The Chinese course can be updated. So now I got to think about what to do about that. That slot, so there's another 4-hour slot, right? So maybe like 1 to 2 hours of Japanese Duolingo, and then 1 to 2 hours of the gaming slot. And the gaming slot may be extended to 4 hours because it's actually practice. So we could have 10-hour streams in the month of February to March. And then we got to throw in Spanish somehow. So it sounds scary, but it's also exciting. I love finding out and tweaking how I can maximize my time and or trim my time, refine my time. I think up to now, after I started language learning, I haven't been at my limit at all. I was not at my limit, except for my voice. My voice gave out a lot of times. However, if people don't mind silent streams, which I don't think I'm a big fan of, right? I could do all of this live. I could like turn off the cam and, you know, don't use my voice and just type. That's not my thing. I don't want people to normalize that, in my opinion, because you do that all the time already, right? You just listen, you have people tell you things, you listen to things and have people show you things, and that's about it. That's about the as active as you can get most of the time. So I don't want to make that a social norm, at least personally. My personal mission statement, I should write a mission statement sometime. I personally do not want people to normalize that. I think being constantly going to bed exhausted, feeling good, like a good exhaustion every day, is easily one of the most liberating things in life, in general. So if you go to bed because you tell yourself you go to bed because you have to rest because you did so many good things, and the only way to get to keep doing those many good things is to rest, and you do that every day, I have no reservations that you will become a superstar in your own eyes or to the people around you, in my opinion. So if there's any way I could contribute to that type of feeling, that'd be great, right? Like, someone has a really great conversation, I spend 2 hours having conversation with someone just on a whim, and then they go to bed. It's like, well, thank you for the great conversation. I'm really tired. We talked a lot. It's not because the conversation is boring. It's because I'm really tired. And, I don't interrupt with their work or something. That's a win in my book. Like, going to bed knowing you did an excellent day of work, that's my jam. And I was ramping up. So yeah, it takes about a year, I would say, at least a year to ramp up this. So I'm more enthusiastic than I actually started. And I feel this is not the case for most people. They actually get less enthusiastic as they continue, right? When someone says, like, you ask someone, what do you think of learning Japanese? And it's like 30 days in, it's like, oh yeah, it's so exciting. Like, I'm hitting a lot of milestones, and I'm so excited that there's a lot of first stuff. It's like I can finally read some subtitles and stuff for the first time and whatnot, and that gets great. And then you fast forward like 2 years in and 3 years in, and then the perspective of progress is diminished, right? There's diminished return because of expertise and whatnot. And it would be something like, oh, it's 200 days in, I'm just gonna, I do the same thing. I'm gonna go through my Anki deck and maybe learn a word or two, and it's business as usual. And I'm like, oh, okay. I hope that is keeping you happy and enthusiastic, because in my opinion, things only get more exciting over time. Like, I do more things with more knowledge. I am even more aggressive with how I'm learning things and what I can do. I like to believe that most people have that capacity. Hello there, Cozy. Hello. And I challenge you, Iris, and Gecko, who might see this later, keep on doing that, at least in my opinion. And of course, get to that limit, and then know that when I get to that limit, I don't get upset that I can't do more with the limited amount of time and stamina. My thought is, man, I don't have any shortage of things that I want to do, right? And yes, that include work. I actually literally sometimes tell myself, do I rather want to go to work or take a walk and, I don't know, grab some Chipotle or something, right? That's legitimately what my life was. I increase the amount of things that I want to do. Like, work, sure, it's tough at first. Like, you could associate all the negative stuff, all the things you're giving up, right? However, you can also set in a mindset, what is it giving? Like, when you work, what else is it giving, and how do you maximize that and whatnot? So at some point, even work, all the ups and downs end up becoming functionally positive things. Like, here's my little hot take that I share all the time about myself. One of the worst skills, in my opinion, personally, and I think other people can objectively say, one of my worst skills in my life when I was growing up is arguably the only skill, okay, maybe among like 2 or 3 other skills, but this is it has become the skill that defines my aptitude, and that's verbal communication, or like most form of communication. Communication, problem solving, and habit management. Those were my arguably one of my worst qualities, and the qualities that I really, really dislike and did not even pay attention to. Talking to other people, any form of talking in public. So seminars, speeches, resolving conflict using words and language, right? Diplomacy, debate, discussion. I avoided confrontations like a plague. You know, if you don't have to talk to someone, you don't have to talk to them. If you're talking to them, is business only. Those were the perspectives of a very objective-minded younger me who only thought about hyper-objectivity and pragmatism. You talk when you have business. Time equals money, right? That kind of thing. And one of the other worst skills that I had was empathy. I barely had sympathy when I was younger. Like, it is quote my old mind, it was a waste of time to pity oneself, nor to sympathize others who do not work hard, and or empathize or be willing to understand what is it that makes them different from you. That was my younger self. It easily one of the worst qualities. So, and I would say among my qualities now are probably most of the unpracticed skills that I had in the past. Habit formation, I was burning so hard. A good metaphor would be I was Icarus with wax wings in a space shuttle being launched directly into the sun. That was how fast and I was burning it, not at both ends of a candle. I was practically melting from all angles, right? So I had poor habit formation, poor habit management, and like moderation. I kept piling on more and more habits without any form of routine or self-check. So you eventually juggle so much. It's like a startup company, right? When a startup company takes off, it expands so much that it falls apart completely because it expands so quickly that it was unable to check itself. There was no checks, no balances. Sounds like a teenager, right? It sounds like a teenager riding a momentum into the stratosphere and only realizing that you're on a one-way trip to the sun, right? That's kind of how I feel about these things. Not that anyone has, but it's an interesting talk that I should really place into like a mission statement or like a trailer or something, because this is kind of what I want to illustrate. So in the next week or two, I will be probably recording a very big piece or like a longish piece on focusing on all the things I overdone. Like I finally reached a limit, and it's kind of nice to know where my limit is because it has been a while. It has been a while. And I'm not saying that streaming is relaxing. Like, I'm not saying that there are things harder or not harder in a way like that doesn't have value, as in like certain things that are hard, they may or may not have more value. Things that are easy may or may not have more value. In terms of my personal life, streaming, studying 2 or 3 different languages, studying for 16 hours straight, talking to people at an incredibly high level, or trying to negotiate like likes, dislikes, editing and all that holds a lick. That holds very, very low effort to me. It is in reality, like for myself personally, what I did before I burned out was madness. It was absolute madness. And because of that madness, I haven't really gotten to a point where I've applied myself hard enough to make it to really tell myself, yeah, I'm at my limit now. Like, this feels good. I haven't been operating at maximum capacity in a really long time. So what does that mean usually though? I feel like lots of people get this notion that I'm working very, very hard, and that's kind of very, it feels nice to be seen as doing something that takes a lot of commitment and whatnot, and I don't want to diminish that compliment in a way. However, I want to be transparent that what a lot of people nowadays online consider as hard work or grinding or being committed, it's almost it's both disappointing, but at the same time humbling in how detached I am from other people, especially younger people's perception of what is hard and what is easy. And when people ask, oh, do you think this language is hard? It's like, well, if you're considering learning it, the answer is no. The hardest things that I've ever done are the things I didn't want to do. So, yes, it's like changing the answer, right? Changing the nature of the answer. But when someone asks me, oh, do you think this is hard? The answer is going to be no. I chose to do this. It's not hard. Like, keeping in mind what I'm saying, right? What the things I'm saying. If you have a choice to do something, it's rarely ever harder than something that's forced upon you, right? And growing up in a different time period, before a time where it feels like you always have a choice to do something online, 90% of the time you're there to do something that's forced upon you, right? You do not have the convenience of technology and whatnot. I sound like an old fart now, like get off my lawn, kid, kind of digression. But even like if I think back even to my parents' generation, like they worked every single day from they worked 14 hours every single day till they wake up, till they go to bed, and they rarely even had time to see or speak and interact with me and my sister, right? For the first 18 years of my life, and even before then, before I was born. So the idea of them looking over here and saying, oh yeah, he's studying Chinese and Japanese and he's putting in a lot of hours, and that's kind of cool that my parents think that's pretty neat, but the comment that come out of their mouth is, you're smart, so this should be easy. And I'm like, well, yes, and also what I'm doing is relatively easy compared to something I can't do, right? Like my parents operating a restaurant. So these things come to mind all the time. I'm keeping Duo happy. Duo is a happy burb, I think. At most, I would say I can't even process doing less than the average Duo user. And I can't, it's difficult for me to empathize with someone who thinks like WaniKani has a high workload, or even if WaniKani is going too slow or too fast. The idea is, if I choose to do it, it's gonna work. One way or another, we're gonna make it work. Sorry. All right. Let's go back. I really need to turn into like a mission statement or something. Take a walk on the wild side. How are you? So you took a walk on the wild side? Is that what you mean? Cozy? How wild did you get? Cozy. Or were you responding to something I was saying? About like taking a walk to grab some Chipotle or something. So, otona, otoner, otona.
Oki-san. This was Convergent. Yeah, Converge. Oh, I remember. Has it already been over 2 weeks? No, it's almost 2 weeks. I remember 2 weeks. It's been almost 2 weeks since the last time I typed toe with TO as opposed to TOE. I remember the first error. Toe was my first error that I made on WaniKani. I typed TO instead of TOE. I was a little slightly triggered. Chikara ippai. I don't actually know what the mnemonic is for the. I think this is Convergent, right? Convergent on ippai. Yeah, it's okay. It's a pass actually. It's a pass. Okay. All right. We'll say bigness or largeness, size. Oh, it's just size. Oh, but they accepted bigness, size. Okay, I should write a note on size. Not quite there. Slide. Oh, these are from the level 1 first days. Interesting. My mnemonic is AI. It looks like AI. It's artificial. But genes don't grow on trees, you know. I guess let's do with all one's strength. That's one that I don't type very hard. And then as hard as you can is the other one. Okay. That's how it works. Kawa. This is a pass through Kawa. Yeah, it's a pass. No, pass. Pass. Well, there you have it. So tomorrow we're gonna get more vocabulary. I mean, more kanji, because 6 of our radicals will be maturing. It's kind of cute because I'm using the word maturing because you can see this icon. It's an egg icon, you know. It's maturing, they're hatching, right? Yeah. So, and I screwed this up because I was being a pep. Okay. So what is our review for today? I guess that's what we're gonna review from now on. We'll write down the adjustments or the things I paused on. And some days maybe I won't have a lot. I'm gonna expect to pause on quite a lot of things. So it's a shame the vocabulary is like not. I would love a mini like scrollable like a inbox with a scrollable thing like here with the vocabulary so I could make a comment. So what are we doing? We are doing so Noboru, right? Noboru was the no boy, right? No boy. Noboru. We're gonna plus Kratos. That's one of the things. And then we have new roku. New roku. So new roku is new locks, right? New locks. Oops. New locks. And we're gonna say new locks opportunity. Right, so this is input, right? New locks, opportunity, right? Opportunity was right, like in CS. We also have Aishita. Taishita. This was a tie for important things. However, the word that I'm missing out on is great. Yama. We are going digging for yams. That was a little short. It might be because I was talking. And Okisa. 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 Oh no. Oh no. Oh wait. Okisa. So, Okisa. So, I keep typing what? Bigness? Right? Bigness? But I'm really looking for size. Right. Those are our things for next time. Oh, and I screwed up. I rushed on Sageru. So I rushed for a ah, but it's not a ah, but a sa, as in saw. Right. And that was my error today. Okay. So, and then we're gonna review these things, right? So, water, dirt, sword, narwhal, street, legs, head, treasure, 1,000, evening, child, small, bow, flag, hair, 5, heaven, and writing, moon, stop, leaf, fire, dog, king, middle, book, rice paddy, white, stan, cow, and private. The reason why I'm reviewing these is because technically, for me personally, I have not actually ascribed meaning to these. So personally, no experience, right? No XP with actually giving radicals names. So we're doing that for now, for the time being. And then we'll go over this too. So how we go over this? Let's just go with like Madu circle, Psi talent. I'm gonna do it in reverse. Usually I go from the mnemonic to the kanji, the read. I'm gonna do it in reverse. So Noku 6, Nichi, Nichi sun, or actually Nichi day. Moku key. Oh no, Moku tree. Wait. Ooh. Oh. Shutsu. Shutsu exit. And Nomu repeater. Those are the things that aren't being reviewed when I'm doing the review exercises, like the way I'm thinking about it.
Oh, hey, the Daily Bot. The Daily Bot. Hello, Daily Bot. Goodbye, Daily Bot. All right. I could write the mnemonics for these if I wanted. Do I want to write the mnemonics of these? Sure. So what was this? This was water circle. Water circle. Slide with barbs. Six, rock and roll. Nietzsche. Nietzsche. I don't know how to pronounce. Maybe that's how you. No, wait. I think that's the name, Nietzsche. And mocking. Shoot you. Shutsu. At the exit. Shutsu at the exit. And just looks like no, and ma put together. Right? Those are our mnemonics. And we'll do it this way from now on. So we can review the basic forms, the radicals, reinforce the meaning of a kanji, and then refresh and iterate on the mnemonics used for the vocabulary words, because these are all the vocabulary words. And that looks like a pretty decent routine that we're gonna go through for the review for that. The Chinese one, Hanzi Hero, has a much different thing because of the way they do mnemonics. These are compartmentalized, so I think having radicals at the basic level for basically the keyword. So we're reducing. Yesterday, this was what I was thinking. So word, where we were doing keyword for this. Phrasing for kanji, and constructs, larger constructs for words. And that's what we're gonna do. And we won't need one on top, not yet. Anyways, we don't need one on top yet, largely because there aren't sentences, right? We don't have sentences in this, and or paragraphs and whatnot. There are some sentences for the context of the vocabulary, so maybe I can do something with that. But yes, there we go. That's it for today for WaniKani. So thanks for hanging out. Thanks for chilling. It's still a little over 3 hours, which is actually the typical WaniKani length, largely because Gecko and I have fantastic discussions every day. How will this turn out in the future? We'll have so many memories together, I suppose. So quite refreshing to have a daily routine. I wonder if Valentine's is doing okay. It was for a bit, it was me and Valentine's, and then we have Blair and Cozy on the Twitch side of things, and kind of fun. Have some regulars. Very refreshing. Okay. So, thanks for hanging out, folks. Thanks for chilling. Always like the conversation, right? If you're gonna watch this later, arigatou gozaimasu, right? So for WaniKani and Japanese enthusiasts, right? Only, mata ne, ja ne, oyasumi nasai, right? And I'm gonna get up, take a quick bathroom break, stretch a bit. I'll be back for Hanzi Hero. Thank you.